Do you struggle in taking good photos, spending hours and hours trying just to produce a bad product? Introducing Miko's Guide to Photos in GT7. Miko's guide features all the tools they trade to fix those drab photos or overblown pictures. Don't believe me? Hear these customer testimonials.
It really helped me showcase my cars.
It saved me from public embarrassment. All thanks to Miko.
And it will help you too. This photo guide is not a guaranteed way to improve your photo taking abilities. Skill issues may still be present and low quality work still may be produced. Consider this before watching or putting a scathing comment below. Your mileage may vary. Hey, I'm your host Miko, and I'll be talking to you about how to take better photos in Gran Turismo 7. Taking your photos from this to this. Alright, enough of the funny bits. Let's get to the actual video. Let's compare Scapes photos versus racing photos. I'm mainly going to be talking about Scapes here, so let's get to it. Scapes photos are easier to set up, have a large variety of real-life locations, and you can also adjust the speed more easily in the photos. You can also include racing drivers outside of the car, even though this feature isn't used too often, and they overall yield higher quality pictures. However, they do have some limits, mainly when it comes to positioning your car or the camera. Your camera can be barely moved in Scapes photos. A couple of them are height adjustable, but that's as much as you're going to get. And you can also have a lot of limits when it comes to placing your car around. Often the streets are tight, so you kind of have to get creative with how you want the car positioned. You also have a limited amount of cars available to you when it comes to setting up a Scape. So if you want to host like a car meet, for example, good luck. It's not going to look right. Now let's talk about racing photos. The good thing with race photos is that you have near unlimited camera positioning and unlimited car positioning. If it can go on the track, you can make it work. There are some limits to it though. You have to race to get these photos, so prep work and a little more time is going to be put into getting a good photo. You also don't really have much real world locations, like you can't have a car on the street. You can have it on a racetrack though, that's real. Another thing too is their overall quality is worse. It's not like the resolution itself is bad, but the rendering is slightly worse due to having to adapt for it being a track. And the background's not going to be as realistic because it's not an actual real-life photo. Scapes photos are best used for nice, good, clean shots, like flexing a livery or just flexing an overall design. Just getting up nice for a real good, realistic photo. But race photos, they're high octane. If you want to show an actual racing scenario, some real track battling, that's where race photos come in. You can also use them to flex your racing skills. Do what you will. Each are good in the right scenario. Much like in real-life photography, prep work is key to a good shot. So consider either your location or car in advance. So this can involve putting the proper tire compound for your car. I personally recommend putting road tires for a street build, but you can actually get away with some racing wet tires. Those have enough tread to look believable, but still look like a very sporty summer tire. Another thing you can do too is adding a custom license plate that best matches the country you're going to be going into, or the time frame that your photo is meant to be from. Here, I have two photos displayed. While I know I'm meant to be the one teaching you, teaching involves asking questions too. So, I have a question for you. Which photo do you prefer? I think we can all agree the photo on the right's the better option. This is because it had prep work done to it. The photo feels a lot more realistic because of this. You can see a lot more dirt on it because it's driving through a dusty road. If you don't do the prep work, sometimes the photo feels like the car just showed up. It just plopped into that location without any driving, without any tow, anything. It just magically appeared. So putting some dirt or other details makes it feel a lot more realistic. Alright, let's get into the more foundational basic settings on what makes a good photo. Two settings that you can do that take zero effort yet add a good amount of quality is to set your ray tracing to on and to set your rendering quality to extra fine. However, this does make the photo take a little longer to render. So consider putting your rendering quality to standard and then switching it to extra fine later for better quality. When adjusting your focus, I strongly recommend you either run lock-on AF or single AF. Lock on AF is mainly related to moving shots though, so it doesn't matter too much. Those two settings though give you a lot more control over how your focus is set, as you can set the location of your focus and then how other things are in focus around it. So it gives you a little bit more control. But full auto is easy to work with, so take your pick. Now let's get into what aperture does and how to adjust your focal length. There's a reason I wanted to put on either single AF or lock on AF, because this whole part is centered around it. The photo on the left has a far larger focal length. The background is clear and the foreground is clear. However, the photo on the right has a short focal length. The background is blurry and the foreground is blurry. How you can use focus is to sort of draw attention to certain parts of the photo. So if you want the photo to feel more claustrophobic and locked in onto one thing, consider running a shorter focus. However, if you want to draw attention to the entire environment, having a larger focus will do that. Exposure correction can often be confused with brightness, but it works differently. It kind of works inverse to how highlight settings work. Only the dark parts of the photo are affected. As you can see, no matter my exposure correction, you can still see the headlights pretty clearly. Other light sources also follow this rule. Exposure correction is great to adjust the dark and mid parts of your photo. Temperature basically adjusts how cool or warm a photo is. The lower values are cooler, while the higher values are warmer. Cooler photos feel overall more serious and dramatic. However, warmer photos feel more nostalgic and inviting. It's a very environmental thing. Depending on your lighting, you may need to adjust temperature as necessary. It's mostly based off of what you want and what kind of vibe you're going for in your photo. Now let's talk about color cast correction. Color cast correction focuses on how green or pink a photo is. This is more an opinion-based one. There's not really a set theory like the same way temperature works. So pick whichever you think best matches your photo. Just try and do, what matches your environment or what kind of vibe you're going for. Now we're into the advanced settings. These are the settings that aren't essential to getting a good shot, but they are pretty useful and allow us to mimic real-world artifacts in our digital photography. So this can include film grain, vignette, lens distortion, and color fringing. All of these are artifacts they often see in an older picture or in something recorded on VHS. So if you're trying to go for an older style photo, these are the settings you really want to aim for. Film grain is something that you're going to use in a lot of your photos, and it's something I think is really important to teach. I always recommend putting at least 1 to 5 points of film grain in the photo. There are two kinds of film grain in Gran Turismo, monochrome and color. This is relative to the pixel or the area that film grain is showing up in. Monochrome means that it's going to follow the relative hue of the pixels behind it. However, color means that it can be any sort of color for the film grain. So it's a lot more noticeable, and it's also going to be closer to a more digital artifacting. Vignette darkens the outside of the image in a circle, so it draws more attention to the center. This is really good for high action shots, as you can draw more attention to your vehicle and give it a more intense feel as you're locked in onto one central location. You can adjust both the vignette strength and the vignette radius. They almost work the same exact way, but vignette radius adjusts how tight the circle formed by the vignette will be. And vignette strength basically adjusts how pronounced that effect is. But in practice, they're mostly the same. Now let's get into lens distortion. Lens distortion makes the center of the photo pop out a lot more. It's really good for if you want to go for a low quality camcorder look. It's also good if you want to go for a more film-based photo in lesser amounts. What I'd recommend is to set it to 0 for most shots that are trying to be clean and look like they're made today. Now let's talk about color fringing. This blurs the edges of the photos by separating the constituent colors that make up a photo. So the red, green, and blue are slightly offset from each other. You can go negative or positive with this value, but they effectively get the same result. It just changes the direction in which the split occurs. While this is arguably the most useless of these settings, it can still be useful if you want to go for a more trippy feeling in the photo, or if you want to simulate, again, a really low quality camcorder look. The last of these settings is glare. Glare creates a bloom effect around bright objects in the photo. This is usually your headlights, however it can be other things too, like streetlights or the sun. It is really good for cars with shiny paint, as you can really get the paint to pop out a lot. Glare is a divisive topic though. Some people love it, some people hate it. I usually like to go for a very small yet tasteful amount of glare. I recommend having high glare for if you're going to go for a classic feeling photo or if you want a lot more intensity. This is because things feel a lot more blown out in your face. In my humble, not so humble opinion, filters are some of the easiest settings to work with when it comes to making a good photo in Gran Turismo. So I'm not going to spend too long teaching you about it, because Gran Turismo does that job for me. The picture of the Miata on the side when you're adjusting your filters gives you a general idea of how they work. I am going to, though, speak about some of my favorite filters to use and how you can use them too. I'll also give you some couple pointers on how filters can be best utilized. These are my 3 favorite filters to work with. The one on the left is Lo-Fi, the one in the middle is Sunset Emphasis, and the one on the right is Clear Skies. Let's talk about the Lo-Fi filter. The Lo-Fi filter makes the dark parts of the photo a little brighter, so it brings out the midtones far more heavily. It makes the photo feel a lot more warm and inviting. It also gives a more film-like look to the photo. The middle one is Sunset Emphasis. It does exactly what's on the tin. It emphasizes the sunset. It makes the rest of the photo a little more drab and gray, but it makes the sky and the amber parts of the photo punch a lot more. Then we have Clear Skies. Clear Skies is, well, again, like Sunset Emphasis, made for the sky. In this case, it makes blues a lot more deep and punchy. Interesting detail about filters is that they're actually added in the order that you have them. So 1, 2, and 3 go in that order. So make sure that the weakest and smallest amount of filtering is done by your option 3. And the more pronounced ones should be put as your first option. Whenever I work in photos, I always recommend having lo-fi as one of your first options if you're going to use it, because it has one of the more pronounced effects in the photo, and it influences a lot on how you will change your other filters. A fun set of filters to work with are the ones that either only allow blue light in or only red light in. These allow for some cool shots. Another thing you can do with them is discuss deeper into the color theory aspects of photo taking, because you can have one extra pronounced color in your photo. So if you have a red car, you can make the photo be only red with other monochrome colors. Going monochrome is a very bold fashion statement when it comes to photos. However, when done tastefully, it can be good. If you are going to use a monochrome filter, almost always use a soft monochrome filter, as it's going to have the best looking shot for the most part. Going monochrome makes the photo feel a lot more classy and refined. Or if you're trying to go for a very, very old-fashioned look, going monochrome can get you that too. Much like filters, individual color tone correction is an extremely potent and effective way to adjust your photos. Yet, it's also equally self-explanatory. To make this video go by quicker, I'm going to give a quick video demonstration on what these settings do. However, I am going to stop and pause on settings that I deem more important, or just little details to give you. Saturation adjusts how hard the colors show through in your photo. Turning it all the way to the left will make it feel effectively monochrome, while turning it up will make the colors a lot more deep and punchy. Turning down your brightness makes the image darker, while turning up your brightness makes the image brighter. If you do not know this, I have no clue how you made it 13 minutes into this video. Contrast decides the difference between the lightest and darkest parts of your photo. So by turning it up, you're making the lighter parts lighter and the darker parts darker. If you have your contrast set to 0, it actually makes the photo one solid gray. Highlight is like brightness, however it only affects the top end of your photo, so only the super bright blown out sections are affected. Black correction is a lot like brightness, however it works slightly differently. It lifts the brightness of the photo as a whole up or down, so you still keep the color contrast, but it allows you to make your dark parts less dark or your dark parts deeper. Now that you understand all the filters, let's put it into practice. Which photo do you prefer? I think we can agree again, the one on the right's better. This is because I turned up the saturation. Saturation is kind of a cheat code to the mind, because we always like colors that are more bright and pungent. So, if we're going to see a photo with higher saturation, we're naturally going to like it more. Try and use this in your photos. Alright, round 2, what's your pick? I think we can agree, again, the one on the right is the better one. This is because I cranked up the contrast. You can notice that across the shadows and details in the hood, they are a lot deeper and more pronounced. our mind naturally wants to go towards a lot of contrast and changing environments. That's why we're good at seeing motion more than we are a still image. Now let's talk about race pictures. It is effectively the same as escapes photos, except you're going to be messing with moving cars. This means that you need to be ready to deal with motion blur, and shutter speed often comes with that. Many people fall apart when it comes to moving shots because they don't know how to adjust the shutter speed or how to make the camera track the vehicle correctly. Shutter speed is the main way to adjust pictures when dealing with motion blur. It's measured in fractions of a second, so consider that when adjusting it. A longer shutter speed, which means a smaller value on the bottom, is going to create a far more blurry photo. However, putting a larger number on the bottom or a shorter shutter speed is going to make the photo look a lot less blurry. Adjust between these two to get the best moving shot possible. I recommend usually going on the too short end when it comes to adjusting a photo. An often not well understood setting is camera tracking ratio. This decides how much the camera moves and actually follows the vehicle while it's moving. So, the higher this camera tracking is, the more blurry the background is going to be relative to the vehicle. So, if you put the camera tracking ratio at 0, it's going to be as if the camera's still completely still. So the background isn't going to move at all visually, but the car is. So bounce between these two to get a good moving shot. I usually like to go on either extreme of the spectrum though. So either go all out tracking the vehicle or all out tracking the background. For the most part, Gran Turismo does a good job at explaining the drift effect, and most of it's common sense. So I'm only going to get into the parts that people don't really know. Some people aren't as well versed in drifting, and so they don't know what is a realistic looking countersteer. When trying to make realistic countersteer, you should try and have it so that your leading front wheel is in line with the direction that the car is going to be sliding in. A little less than that is okay, but for the most part, it should be lined up with the direction of the vehicle. There are two things when it comes to smoke and drifting. The first is related to the volume of the smoke. Usually people go too far with the volume. While this does look cool, most street drift builds don't create a lot of smoke when sliding. However, if you're going for a more intense formula drift build, they often are going to smoke a lot more. The second thing is related to the source of the smoke. Unless you're drifting an all-wheel drive vehicle, the smoke should come exclusively from the rear wheels. Because if you're also overheating your front tires while drifting, you're doing something very wrong. When I mean thinking like a photographer, I mean thinking about good composition. You should look at a location and try and imagine how the car is going to fit into that scene. You should also consider how you're going to place that car in that scene and how you can use even things such as color theory to enhance your photo. The first thing you should do is consider the positioning of your car relative to the photo. For the most part, your car should be centered in the photo. When working with the grid, your vehicle should be comfortably in the middle square. It's fine if it is a little offset within that square, but the car is the focal point of your picture, so it should be in the middle. This tip though isn't fully set in stone. When it comes to race photos, sometimes leading the car will make the photo look a lot better as it better conveys a sense of speed. Many people lock themselves into a landscape 16:9 photo. However, it is okay to go beyond this. Sometimes thinking vertical is a good approach. The main time I see this being used is when it comes to working with tall buildings. The verticality of the landscape shot will match the verticality of the buildings, which will make the image feel a lot more cohesive. I'd also like to highlight 1:1 shots. These aren't landscape nor portrait, but they are really fun when it comes to vignette. Since vignette works in a circle, having that 1:1 shot means that vignette is going to affect all sides of it equally. It's not going to specifically target the top and the bottom or the left and the right side. Let's take you guys back to elementary or primary school. We're going to be discussing the color wheel here because yes, this does actually matter in photos. Having photos where the colors are close to each other on the color wheel can look very appealing, especially if the car and environment match each other well. This makes the photos feel a lot more cohesive and just outright better to the eye. While having the vehicle match the environment can look appealing, sometimes having it contrast with the environment can look a lot better too. For example, having a car with a very bright and deep colorway can look really good in a dull environment because our eyes are naturally attracted to the contrast that that's going to give us. You aren't stuck to creating contrast by only changing the amount of color between the vehicle and the background. You can also change the kinds of colors between the vehicle and the background. For example, you can have a car with a very warm colorway and then have the background in some cooler colors. Or you can just pick colors that are opposite ends of the color wheel. My personal favorite way to do a color contrast is to have warm colors and cool colors clash. More specifically, I like to have a pale, bluish green car next to a deep sunset. The warm colors in the sunset, such as the pinks and oranges, really contrast against the green, which is a more cool color. Thank you for sticking it out. A whole 21-minute video on everything about photos, but I felt like it was a topic I cared a lot about, and hopefully you guys can get some better photos with it. Peace. Again, sticking around to the real end of the video, here's a blooper reel of everything. Don't hold me accountable to any of this, man. It's meant to be goofy. It's meant to be bad. All right, now let's continue. Adding some lenses. That's going in the blooper reel. Final. Another fun set of filters to work with are the ones that either only allow blue light or red light in. These are just interesting for certain shots, especially if you want to highlight some sort of rivalry where color matters a lot. Sounds like racism. Talking about Subaru versus Mitsubishi, but still. But the car is the focal point of your not your video. I'm the one making the video. And other focus around it. Kind of like burped midway. Okay, now I definitely burped. When working with your focus settings, try easier. All right, I'm your host Miko. I'm gonna.